Chelsea's £106.8 million man has divided opinion since his arrival, with many wanting a midfielder that demanded that fee to offer everything. But lo and behold, Enzo Maresca has platformed Fernandez effectively, managing to get the best out of the Argentine. But how exactly has he done this? Well, to understand that, we have to travel back from here to here. Under Graham Potter, Enzo Fernandez found himself in the deep line playmaker number 6 role alongside Ruben Loftus-Cheek in this example, but often also used alongside Mateo Kovacic. As you can see in the image, the side would play with that back four in the build-up in that first phase with Enzo Fernandez in front with the double pivot. Now, this was good in the sense that Enzo could get on the ball in that double pivot alongside another player, as I said, such as Loftus-Cheek or Kovacic. However, when the fullbacks did go forward, there was one issue. Fernandez would then find himself having to defend in transition, not one of his strengths, and therefore that led to Chelsea thinking that to pair alongside Fernandez, you needed a bit more of a ground-covering, mobile midfielder to help iron out those weaknesses. Enzo completed 1.46 progressive carries per 90 and 10.2 progressive passes per 90, scoring 0.02 goals per 90 and 0.2 assists per 90. He was averaging 1.66 shots, but only 0.29 of these were on target, which was 17.6% of his shots, and this was largely due to the distance they were coming at. The Argentine had 90.8 passes attempted per 90, which had an 87% completion rate. He was making 1.37 key passes, 3.54 shot-creating actions, and then making 2.73 tackles, 1.51 blocks, and 1 interception per 90. Since he's been at Chelsea, these were his best progressive passing numbers per 90, his most passes attempted per game with his highest completion rate, but also his most blocks and interceptions per 90, showing that extra defensive quality that was needed for his role under Graham Potter. Which leads us on nicely to Enzo's time under Pochettino. And privately, it was even questioned by Pochettino whether Enzo was destructive enough to be a number 6 or creative enough to be an 8/10. Poch tried to use Enzo in many different ways. To begin with, he started off using him as a bit more of a number 10, realised that wasn't working when he was receiving with his back to goal, close to goal, and not being able to face up defensive to use that passing range. Then, when he was dropped in deeper, he would still often be sort of instructed to make those forward runs and leaving Caicedo in these huge open gaps, which would not help Chelsea defend in transition, and it would leave little protection behind him. Another factor of this is the style of football Pochettino plays. He wanted to speed up the game at all times, which encourages transitional moments, both on the offensive and defensive end. This certainly isn't a strength for Enzo Fernandez, and it certainly isn't going to be a strength for the team in certain areas when you're still relying on Enzo Fernandez to do the roles which he is not comfortable with. Even when Fernandez was pushed up this high as instructed, closer to Jackson, if Chelsea lost the ball, they would be in danger to conceding a shot due to the low level of protection in transition. Even in these out-of-possession moments, Fernandez was still the one to aggress, with Caicedo often just having to cover a lot of that central space on his own as Palm would also press alongside the striker. In the 23-24 season, Fernandez made 2.12 progressive carries per 90 and 8.57 progressive passes per 90, fewer than his 10.2 the season before. He scored 0.2 goals per 90 and assisted 0.09 times per 90, taking 1.9 shots and 0.76 of them being on target with a 40% shot on target rate. This was the best shot volume that he's had at Chelsea, even better than he's had so far this season. And much of that can come down to the role when he was more advanced, again, getting up alongside Jackson in the instruction of Pochettino. He was averaging 76 pass attempts per 90, 84.5 completion, with 1.31 key passes per 90 and 3.35 shot-creating actions. And defensively, the numbers were down with 2.04 tackles, 1.10 blocks, and 0.73 interceptions. Again, much to do with that role and often leaving Caicedo in those defensive zones on his own in central positions. Which leads us on perfectly to the system change at the end of the season that saw such success for even Pochettino. At the back end of the season, Pochettino began to invert Cucurella alongside Caicedo, giving him some support for ball winning and dual purposes in central zones. This allowed Gallagher that extra freedom to drop in as that spare +1 in possession to make a 3-3 base in the build-up phase, and also allow some protection behind his space when he did advance, having Cucurella there to cover that lane. Unfortunately for Enzo Fernandez, he missed the tactical change that would have suited his game down to the ground as he was out for the back end of the season with that hernia problem. However, the groundwork was already being laid for him to come back into the side next season and thrive in a position that was exactly designed for him. So far this season, Fernandez is actually having to put in less progressive actions for both carries and passes, with 1.16 progressive carries per 90 and 5.62 progressive passes per 90, him having more under Poch and under Graham Potter than he has under Maresca. However, his output is higher than it has ever been, with 0.23 goals per 90 and 0.53 assists per 90, becoming that playmaker that everybody knew he could be. Now, his shot volume is down with only 1.22 shots and 0.53 of them on target, but his shot on target percentage is the highest it's been with 43.8%. Again, an indictment of him arriving in the box later with less marking on him and less coverage for him to get the correct shots off. He is also making the fewest passes he's attempted, with 62.5 passes attempted per 90 and 83.5% completion, which is the lowest it's been under any manager as well. However, his effectiveness in the passing has gone up, with 1.98 key passes per 90, the most it has been, and 4.13 shot creating actions, again at the most it has been. And lastly, on the defensive end, 2.89 tackles, the highest it's been, 1.4 blocks and 0.53 interceptions. Enzo Maresca is now putting Enzo Fernandez in the exact positions he needs to be in to affect the game at the highest level. With his output going up for both goals and assists, his shots becoming more efficient, his key passes going up and his creative numbers going up in general, but also his tackles as he has more of that protection behind him so he can converge backwards on the ball to help win the ball within packs and press in packs. Fernandez is Enzo Maresca's tactical weapon because he can do a little bit of everything and he has the intelligence to apply those tactics on the pitch, dropping in to help progress play, advancing as the playmaker and also arriving in the box. But how exactly has he platformed Fernandez? Let's go and have a look on the tactics board. And now we're on the tactics board to discuss exactly how Enzo Maresca is getting the best out of Enzo Fernandez in a few different ways by supplementing the team around him. Now, against Tottenham for the first half, we saw Enzo in this familiar sort of left space. One thing I want to highlight before we quickly go into the way that he's sort of platforming Enzo in different ways with players around him is the usage of Enzo in this channel. And what I love about the fact that in this system, especially with sort of another pivot player here like Caicedo, when they've made that midfield three, is Enzo has that ability to drop into this pocket here to create that 3-3 and then a 4 in the front line. But then he also has, oh, there's a little box there. He also has that ability to then break forward and be a receiver in this spot. Again, something he's very good at. He can be creative. He can receive the ball in this pocket of space where he can then face forward, use that passing range, carry the ball forward to allow one of the wingers to be 1v1, and just use that overall IQ of how to progress play in different manners in terms of whether it's a switch, whether it's a play it into the channel normally, or whether to just circulate play backwards. He's got a very good, keen eye for this, and that's, in my opinion, is one of his best assets, is his understanding of the game. And I think the freedom that he's allowed when he can be a bit of both in this channel, Maresca's really nailed it on the head in terms of offering protection behind him. But how has he done that? Well, let's start with the Caicedo inverting him from right back role, because what this does is it still provides 5 men behind the ball here, and Enzo defensively, as well as Palmer, they're both expected to be those sort of 6th men. Okay, so maybe Enzo more so than the other, because Palmer at times will press alongside Jackson and Enzo will drop into the pivot. But the point is Enzo is a 6th defender. He's not a 5th defender, and he's definitely not a 4th defender. He's a 6th defender in this sense. He's got protection in all areas, and he's coming back to help the defence and do his bit, but it's not, the transitional defence isn't reliant on him. He's got Lavia there, he's got Caicedo who's inverted, and then he can recover and be that 6th man against essentially 5, unless their DM also breaks forward, but then Palmer can also help to work that as well. Now, if we move over from this example of what he can do, how he can be effective, if we move over from that to how they set up in the second half, now we've got Enzo in that deeper position. Okay, so you've got him in that back 5, that back block of 5. Let me change this to yellow, just easier to see. You got him in that block of 5, like we said. He's really good in this zone. He can create and he can dictate from this zone. He can play those passes into these pocket players, find the spare man. Like I said, at the weekend, it was a lot of the time it's Kukurea. He can find that pass. He can really dictate the tempo and give Chelsea good control and rhythm on the ball in that area of the pitch. But the issue with that, as some people will say, is that now he's a 5th defender because Caicedo will cover him, but now he's technically the DM in this scenario, or alongside Caicedo, he's still that DM. So now it's even more important on the same side as him that you have somebody who's going to work hard and facilitate that work rate and that sort of like defensive ability of Enzo. Enzo's job will then be to hold a player up in this zone, slow them down in order for someone like Cucurella to swoop in and make that a 2v1. Enzo doesn't have to come charging in and make the challenge, because if he misses it, then Chelsea are in trouble. But if he can just slow that down, and he has somebody who's very hard working, someone like Cucurella who's intense and will work on do the hard yards for Enzo, then you have something really good, because then you have six defenders, and his job is more to slow, which I think Enzo's actually quite good at in terms of sort of shuttling side to side and making his opponent make a decision. One thing that he does do slightly too often, and I think that it's still sort of something that he needs to improve on when he is playing in this role, and sort of, as we say, he has to slow someone down, is what I said. Sometimes he's a bit aggressive, sometimes he likes to snap into challenges, which is why he's done so well coming from here, because he can be a little bit more aggressive on the ball, and if he does miss a challenge, he's still got 5 players protecting him. However, in this role, it's the opposite. He has to be a little bit more just willing to be patient with his challenge, allow others to retreat, and then he can try and make a challenge, because he'll have Cucurella sweeping around or something like this with the intensity of the game. But that's how you can platform it on that side of the pitch. Again, if he was on this side of the pitch, then he wouldn't be as protected, because Palmer's not going to work as hard on those hard yards. Neto does work hard back into these zones, but he's got a further distance to travel than someone like Palmer if we're talking about this build-up shape, especially with the wingers being so high and wide, which would then leave him a little bit susceptible. But if you have the inverted fullback on the same side as you did with Cucurella in that second half, you can negate a little bit of that off-ball tenacity that you need by having that sixth defender come in from his side of the pitch. The last thing to mention is how we did it against Leicester, because both of these examples have had the inverted fullbacks central. Now, how we did it against Leicester, if I can find it, there we go, is very different. What we have here is we sort of created the diamond. Now, this isn't how they set up on the ball. They had a back 5, so they essentially was pressing almost like with a 3, then a 2. Sort of like this, I guess. I can't get the exact shape up on screen, but the fact is we had a fullback out here, Cucurella, we had Madueke on the wing, and then Jackson, and Palmer was sort of the free man in between the lines, being that front 4. Now what we had, if we get the lines here, this midfield 3 have to work hard. Now, luckily, you don't have that same pressure because they've only got that front 3. And these 2 players sitting a little bit deeper, they are the way that Chelsea can get overrun. At the minute, if they lose the ball here, that's a 4v3. That's fine, and you've still got the overload. The issue is if one of these make the run, whichever side that is, you have to cover. So in this sense, Enzo had the same issue, or not the same issue, he had the same responsibility as Felix did. And this is why I've praised Felix so much in this role as well, because now these players know that if their man runs off into this channel, they're going to create an overload for the team. So someone like Felix has to match that. Same with Enzo. This guy goes, Enzo has to match it. Otherwise, they've got an advantage. And that is the difference. That's the key difference this year. It's not just on Enzo, because he's now not being viewed as defence first sort of role, that he's the one that has to get back. It's a team effort. If your man goes, you go with them. So if anything, in this game against Leicester, it was actually Felix who was often having to drop even deeper because Cucurella is the one out of position. What Enzo had a little bit more protection because he had Fofana behind him here, and he also had Madueke, who, again, he'd trap back as well. And he already had the sort of players in their right position because Fofana was playing right back in this game, inverting into that right centre-back. So Enzo had a little bit more protection, but Felix was actually the one that had to cover, especially with Cucurella a few times. I'll try and flash up an image of that on screen now, of him recovering for Cucurella in that spot. But my point is these players are now sort of, it's very in tandem of what needs doing. And I think Maresca is platforming Enzo Fernandez really, really well to get the best out of him and to protect the few defensive liabilities that he does have, but also to get the best out of him creatively on the ball. Enzo Maresca has found a way to make Enzo Fernandez tick, and it is amazing to see because we are getting the best out of the £106.8 million midfielder, and the quality is starting to shine through that everybody knew was there.